She thought the mask would protect her, that what happened in Venice would stay locked beneath gilded bridges and carnival lights. But when she walked into the Monday morning meeting and saw him, the stranger she'd kissed in the dark, sitting at the head of the table as her new CEO, she realized some secrets don't stay buried. They follow you, they watch you, and sometimes they own you. This is a story of power, control, and the dangerous line between wanting something and allowing yourself to have it. If you're ready for a romance that doesn't play by the rules, subscribe now and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because this is just the beginning.
And everything got late. You didn't know my name that night. I didn't know your face.
Mila Hart had learned over 28 years of life that mistakes had a way of announcing themselves quietly before they destroyed you. The email had arrived on Sunday evening while she was still shaking Venetian glitter from her coat pockets. Subject line, organizational changes, effective immediately. She'd opened it with wine-stained fingers and a headache that tasted like regret. Thomas Crane will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer, effective Monday, 9 a.m. She didn't recognize the name. She should have. Now standing outside the glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor of the Crane International building, Mila felt the mistake coil around her ribs like a living thing. Cold, patient, waiting. Through the glass she could see him. Dark suit, shoulders that didn't need tailoring to convey authority, a jaw that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood cruelty as an art form, and a mouth she'd kissed 3 nights ago in Venice. Her breath caught. Not in the romantic chest-fluttering way novels promised. This was sharper. A snag, a hook, the kind of gasp that came right before you realized you'd stepped off a ledge. She forced herself to breathe. He doesn't know it was you. The mask, the crowd, the chaos of Carnival. She'd been anonymous, a stranger in a city of strangers. But as his eyes lifted, dark, unreadable, impossibly steady, and met hers through the glass, Mila knew with cold, sinking certainty something had shifted. Whether he remembered or not didn't matter. He was looking at her like she was a problem he intended to solve. Inside the conference room, the air tasted like expensive cologne and fear. Mila took her seat at the far end of the table, as far from the head as the architecture allowed. Around her, her colleagues whispered, adjusted ties, smoothed skirts, everyone trying to look indispensable. Thomas Crane didn't look at any of them. He stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly on the back of the chair, and waited. Not for silence, it came instantly, but for something else. Submission, maybe. Acknowledgement that the room now belonged to him. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to fill a space. "I don't believe in long introductions," he said. "You know who I am. What you don't know is what I expect." He let the pause stretch. Mila's pulse hammered in her throat. "I expect precision, efficiency, loyalty." His gaze swept the table, slow and deliberate. "I don't tolerate waste. I don't reward mediocrity, and I don't forgive mistakes." The last word landed like a stone in still water. Mila's fingers tightened around the pen in her hand. He still hadn't looked directly at her, not since that first brief glance through the glass. But she felt it, the awareness, the weight of something unspoken. Miss Hart. Her name cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. Mila's throat went dry. Thomas's eyes locked onto hers, calm, clinical, empty of anything she could use. "You'll stay after the meeting," he said. "We need to discuss your performance review." It wasn't a question. It was a command. The room emptied in nervous silence. Mila stayed seated, fingers pressed flat against the table to stop them from shaking. The door clicked shut. The sound echoed. Thomas didn't move. He remained standing, arms crossed, watching her with the same detached intensity a surgeon might use to examine an incision. "Stand up," he said quietly. She did, slowly. Her chair scraped against the floor, too loud, too raw in the silence. He walked toward her, not quickly, not threateningly, just inevitably. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, close enough to smell the clean, cold scent of his cologne, something sharp, like winter air and old money. "You traveled recently," he said. Mila's heart kicked against her ribs. Yes, a weekend trip." "Where?" Her mouth went dry. "Europe." Thomas tilted his head slightly. studying her the way someone might study a chessboard mid-game, calculating, predicting. Interesting timing, right before a major leadership transition. It wasn't an accusation. It was worse. It was an observation that left space for her to fill in the blanks. It was personal, Mila managed. Personal. He repeated the word like he was testing its weight. I hope it was worth it. The way he said it, calm, almost casual, made her stomach drop. Did he know? Or was this just how he operated? Testing, probing, watching for cracks. Thomas stepped back, creating distance that somehow felt more dangerous than proximity. He returned to the head of the table, picked up a file, opened it with deliberate care. Your contract is up for renewal in 60 days, he said, eyes scanning the page. Your performance record is adequate, not exceptional, not concerning. Adequate. He looked up. That's no longer acceptable. Mila's nails bit into her palms. I want you to understand something, Thomas continued, his tone unchanged, still calm, still controlled, still utterly devoid of warmth. I don't tolerate complacency. I don't reward past performance. And I don't forget when someone underestimates me. The last word landed with precision. He never said Venice, never mentioned the kiss, but the weight in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He knew, or he suspected, and he was waiting to see what she'd do with that uncertainty. Thomas closed the file. Your work will be under direct review for the next 30 days. You will report to me weekly. You will meet every deadline. You will exceed every expectation. He paused. Or you will be replaced. Mila lifted her chin. Understood, she said. Thomas nodded once. Good. He turned toward the window, dismissing her without another word. Mila walked to the door, legs unsteady beneath her. Her hand was on the handle when his voice stopped her. Miss Hart. She froze, didn't turn around. Mistakes have consequences, some immediate, some delayed. His tone was perfectly neutral. The smart ones learned to tell the difference. The words followed her into the hallway. They tasted like a warning. Mila didn't go back to her desk. She went to the bathroom on the 28th floor, 4 floors down, far enough that no one from her department would follow, and locked herself in the furthest stall. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, willing them still, willing her breath to slow, willing the tight, hot feeling in her chest to dissipate into something manageable. It didn't. Does he know? Of course he knew. She'd been naive to think a mask and darkness could erase her, that a single reckless moment could be contained by distance and denial. But he hadn't said it, hadn't confirmed it, which meant either he was testing her, or he was giving her a chance to pretend it never happened. Mila closed her eyes. Venice came back in fragments, the weight of the mask on her face, the sound of violins bleeding into the night from some invisible source, the way the stranger Thomas had looked at her across the crowded piazza, his own mask elegant and severe, covering everything but his mouth and the sharp line of his jaw. She'd been drunk, not falling down drunk, but loose, unmoored, the kind of drunk that made consequences feel theoretical. He'd approached her, not with a line or a smile, but with a question. Are you lost? His voice had been different then, softer, almost human. She'd laughed. Isn't everyone? And then God, she didn't even know how it happened. His hand had been at the small of her back, guiding her away from the crush of tourists into a narrow alley where the music was muffled and the air smelled like canal water and stone. He'd kissed her. No, that wasn't right. She'd kissed him. Or they'd kissed each other. A collision more than a choice. It had lasted maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. His mouth had been warm and firm and tasted faintly of whiskey. His hand had stayed on her, waist steady, not grasping, controlled even then. When they'd pulled apart, he'd looked at her for a long moment, searching for something or deciding something. Then he'd stepped back. You should go, he'd said quietly. And she had. Mila opened her eyes. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed faintly, a mechanical hum that made her head ache. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opened the company directory, typed his name. Thomas Crane. His profile loaded. Psycho, 36 years old, MBA from Oxford, previously COO of Meridian Holdings, a private equity firm known for hostile takeovers and restructuring failing companies into profitable machines. There were rumors too, the kind that didn't make it into official bios. She'd heard them in the break room that morning, whispered over coffee by people who thought they were being quiet. Crane's connected. Connected how? So you know, family, old money, European old money, the kind that doesn't show up on tax records. You mean? I mean his family owns half of Sicily, and people don't ask questions. Mila's stomach twisted. Mafia. The word hadn't been spoken aloud, but it hung in the air like smoke. She didn't know if it was true, didn't know if it mattered. What mattered was that Thomas Crane now controlled her livelihood, her career, and apparently her secrets. And he'd made it very clear he didn't forgive mistakes. The question was whether he'd already decided she'd made one, or whether he was waiting for her to make another. Mila didn't go back to her desk immediately. She walked to the water cooler, filled a cup she didn't drink, stood by the window overlooking the city glass towers, stretching toward a sky that looked like it had been scrubbed clean of color. Her phone buzzed. Internal message from HR. Mandatory background refresh required for all senior project staff. Please complete attached forms by EOD. Mila frowned. She wasn't senior project staff. She opened the attachment anyway. Security clearance, financial disclosure, emergency contacts, standard corporate paranoia, except she'd filled out identical forms 8 months ago when she was hired. Why again? Why now? Her phone buzzed a second time. Different sender, Thomas Crane. Conference room B, 2 p.m. No subject line, no context. Just a summons. Conference room B was smaller than the main boardroom. No windows, just white walls, a rectangular table and air that smelled faintly of coffee and stress. Thomas was already seated when Mila arrived. He didn't look up from his laptop. Close the door, sit. She did. He continued typing for another 30 seconds, long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable, then finally closed the laptop and looked at her. This company conducts comprehensive background vetting for all employees involved in sensitive operations, he said. Standard practice, non-negotiable. Mila kept her expression neutral. I wasn't aware I was involved in sensitive operations. You are now. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial records, her financial records. Student loans, $53,247 remaining. Rent, utilities, a care facility in Ohio billing $4,800 monthly. Her mother. Mila's throat tightened. How did you? Standard vetting includes credit reports, employment history, and dependent care obligations. Thomas's tone was clinical, detached. We need to know who's vulnerable, who has leverage points, who might be compromised by external pressure. He paused. You're financially strained. That makes you a risk. Mila's hands clenched beneath the table. I've never missed a payment, never defaulted, never... I'm not accusing you of anything, Miss Hart. Thomas leaned back in his chair. I'm explaining why you were flagged and why I'm making you an offer. He opened a second file. Effective immediately, you'll serve as lead strategist for the European rebranding initiative. Salary increase of 40%. Performance bonuses tied to quarterly milestones. Health insurance upgrade that includes extended care coverage. Mila's breath caught. 40%. That would cover her mother's facility, pay down her loans, give her room to breathe for the first time in years. Why? She asked quietly. Thomas's expression didn't change. Because you're capable. Because you handled the Meridian crisis last year without creating additional exposure. Because you understand discretion. He paused. And because you're desperate enough not to ask too many questions. The honesty was brutal. Mila swallowed. What's the catch? There's always a catch, Miss Hart. Thomas stood, walked to the window, or where a window would have been if the room had one. This project requires complete loyalty. You report directly to me. No intermediaries, no HR buffer, no corporate protections. He turned to face her. You'll have access to information that could destroy this company if mishandled. You'll meet with people who don't appear on organizational charts. You'll be asked to make decisions that exist in gray areas. His eyes held hers. And if you fail or if you betray my trust, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose everything. The threat was delivered calmly, almost kindly. That made it worse. Mila forced herself to meet his gaze. And if I say no? Thomas tilted his head slightly. Then your contract expires in 60 days. You'll receive a neutral reference, and you'll spend the next 6 months trying to find equivalent work while your mother's care costs drain what's left of your savings. He wasn't gloating, wasn't cruel. He was simply stating facts. That's not a choice, Mila said. That's coercion. Yes. Thomas returned to his seat. Welcome to corporate strategy. Mila left the meeting with a signed contract and a sinking feeling in her stomach. She returned to her desk. Her manager, David, was waiting. He didn't look happy. My office, he said quietly. She followed. David closed the door, didn't sit, just stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. I just got word you're being transferred. It's temporary, Mila said. A special project. Reporting directly to Crane. Yes. David shook his head. Do you have any idea what you just agreed to? A promotion. A target. David's voice dropped. Thomas Crane doesn't promote people, Mila. He selects them. And once you're selected, you're either useful or disposable. There's no in-between. Mila's hands tightened around her laptop bag. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. David sat down heavily. You just made yours. I hope it's worth it. That evening, Mila sat in her apartment with a glass of wine and a contract she'd already signed. Her phone buzzed. Text unknown number. First briefing tomorrow 7 a.m. My office. Bring the European market analysis from Q3. Don't be late. T. She stared at the message. 7 a.m. before most of the building was even awake. She typed back, understood. His response came immediately. Good. One more thing. Venice was a mistake. What happens now is business. Keep them separate. Mila's chest tightened. So he did remember. And he was drawing a line. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something else. Something uncomfortably close to disappointment. Mila arrived at 6:52 a.m. The executive floor was silent. No assistants, no security guards visible. Just polished marble, floor-to-ceiling windows, and the kind of emptiness that made every footstep sound like an intrusion. Thomas's office was at the end of the hall. The door was open. Mila stopped just outside, her pulse ticking unevenly in her throat. Through the doorway she could see him seated behind a desk of dark wood and glass, reading something on his laptop. His shirt was crisp white, sleeves rolled to his forearms, no tie, no jacket. He looked different in the early morning light, less severe, more human. She knocked. He didn't look up. Come in, close the door. Mila stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind her. The office smelled like leather and coffee. There was an espresso machine on a side table, still warm. A single cup beside it, black, no sugar. Thomas finally looked up. His eyes moved over her face with the same clinical assessment he'd used in the conference room. No warmth, no recognition of anything beyond the professional. Sit. She sat. He closed his laptop, folded his hands on the desk. Tell me what you know about Crane International's European operations. Mila had prepared for this. She'd stayed up until 2 in the morning reading reports, analyzing market data, drafting preliminary observations. Current brand perception skews corporate. Cold. The European market responds better to legacy narratives, heritage, family tradition, cultural integration. Your competitors are positioning themselves as... Stop. The word cut through her momentum like a blade. Mila blinked. I'm sorry? Thomas leaned back in his chair. You're giving me a marketing pitch. I don't need a pitch. I need you to understand what we're actually doing. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a file, and slid it across the desk. Mila opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles, photographs, all about the Crane family. Alleged ties to organized crime. Money laundering investigation in Naples closed without charges. Suspicious deaths of business rivals dating back 3 generations. Her stomach dropped. This, Thomas said quietly, is what we're fighting. Not market perception, public suspicion. Mila looked up. You want me to... what? Make people forget this? I want you to make them stop caring. The distinction was sharp, calculated. Thomas stood, walked to the window. The city stretched out beneath them, glass towers, steel veins, millions of people moving through their small, contained lives. My family has been in business for 4 generations, he said, voice low. We built empires, we survived wars, recessions, political upheaval. And yes, we made alliances that exist outside legal frameworks. He turned to face her. But I am not my father. I am not my grandfather. And I am not my Uncle Giuliano, who's currently serving as the family's liaison in Sicily. The pause before liaison was deliberate. Mila's throat felt tight. This company will be legitimate, Thomas continued. Clean, untouchable. But first we need Europe to believe it, and that requires someone who understands narrative control without moral posturing. He returned to his desk. That's why you're here, Miss Hart. Not because of Venice, not because I find you interesting. Because you're competent, financially vulnerable, and pragmatic enough to do what's necessary. The coldness of it should have stung. Instead, Mila felt something else. Clarity. This wasn't a promotion. It was conscription. And if I can't deliver, she asked. Thomas's gaze didn't waver. Then you'll be replaced, and your financial situation will remain exactly as precarious as it is now. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Thomas laid out the parameters with surgical precision. Target markets, key stakeholders, media contacts who needed to be courted or neutralized, political figures whose favor could be purchased through charitable foundations. It was brilliant. It was also morally ambiguous in ways that made Mila's chest tighten. When he finally dismissed her, the sun had fully risen. The city outside was awake now, bustling with the noise of a new day. Mila stood, gathered her notes. Miss Hart. She paused at the door. Thomas was watching her, expression unreadable. You're wondering if this makes you complicit? It wasn't a question. Mila turned back. Does it? Yes. His honesty was brutal. But you were complicit the moment you signed the contract. The only question now is whether you're effective. He picked up his coffee cup. 7 a.m. tomorrow, same agenda. Mila nodded once, then left before she could say something she'd regret. Over the next 3 weeks, the meetings became routine. 7 a.m. His office. Reports on media outreach, stakeholder engagement, brand positioning. Thomas would listen, ask questions that exposed every weak point in her strategy, then dismiss her with instructions that somehow made everything sharper, cleaner, more effective. He was brilliant. He was also exhausting. Because proximity to Thomas Crane meant existing in a constant state of vigilance. Every word measured, every gesture calculated. One misstep, and she'd see that cold flicker in his eyes, the one that said he was reconsidering her value. But something else was happening too. Something Mila didn't want to name. She'd started noticing things, small things. The way his jaw tightened when someone interrupted him, the faint scar on his left hand that he touched absently when he was thinking. The rare moments when his expression softened, just barely, when he looked out at the city as if remembering something he'd lost. It was dangerous. Not because she felt anything for him, but because noticing meant caring, and caring meant weakness. On a Thursday afternoon in late February, everything shifted. Mila was in her office, reviewing drafts of a press release when her phone buzzed. Thomas. My office, now. No context, no explanation. She saved her work and headed upstairs. When she entered, Thomas wasn't alone. A man stood near the window, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that looked like it had been sewn directly onto his body by someone who understood power as an aesthetic. He turned as Mila entered, and his eyes, pale grey, almost colourless, moved over her with the assessing gaze of someone who calculated worth in seconds. Miss Hart, Thomas said, voice neutral. This is my father, Domenico Crane. Mila's stomach dropped. She'd seen his photograph, read the articles, heard the whispers. This was the man people didn't speak about directly. The ghost. Domenico smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Her pleasure, he said, accent faint but unmistakable Italian. Refined, old world. He extended a hand. Mila shook it. His grip was firm, cold. My son speaks highly of your work, Domenico continued. Mila glanced at Thomas. His expression was unreadable, but his shoulders were tense. Thank you, she managed. Domenico released her hand, turned back to the window. Europe is complicated, particularly for families like ours. Reputation is currency. Perception is power. He paused. Thomas tells me you understand this. I'm doing my best, Mila said carefully. Your best. Domenico repeated the words as if tasting them. Your best has been adequate so far, but adequate is not sufficient for what comes next. Mila frowned. I don't understand. Thomas spoke. We're hosting a gala in Milan, 3 weeks from now. Investors, politicians, media. The goal is to demonstrate that Crane International is not what the rumors suggest. And you'll be attending, Domenico added, looking at Mila, as part of Thomas's executive team publicly, visibly. The room tilted. I'm not executive level, Mila said. You are now. Thomas's voice remained calm. Effective immediately, you're acting head of European brand strategy. The promotion will be announced tomorrow. Mila's breath caught. This isn't optional, Domenico said quietly. We need young, credible American faces attached to this company. You fit the profile. The calculation was naked, transactional. Mila's hands clenched at her sides. And if I refuse? Domenico's smile sharpened. Then your contract terminates immediately, and I suspect your mother's care facility will find your payment history insufficient. The threat was delivered politely, almost kindly. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict his father. Mila's vision blurred at the edges. Understood, she said quietly. Domenico nodded. Good, Thomas will provide details. He left without another word. The door closed. Silence filled the space like smoke. Thomas didn't look at her. He walked to his desk, poured himself a glass of water from a crystal decanter, drank half of it before speaking. I apologize for his bluntness. Do you agree with him? Mila asked. Thomas set the glass down, looked at her. Yes. The honesty was brutal. Mila's breath came faster. I'm not going to Milan to be your prop. You are. Thomas's tone didn't change. Because you signed a contract that gives me authority over project assignments, and because refusing will cost you everything. It was a threat, polite, precise, undeniable. Mila's hands trembled. You're using me. Yes, Thomas crossed his arms. The same way you're using this job to keep your mother in care. We're all using each other, Miss Hart. That's how power works. That's how your world works, Mila shot back. Not mine. For the first time, something flickered in Thomas's eyes. Not anger. Something colder. Disappointment, maybe. Then you're naive, he said quietly, and naivety will destroy you faster than anything my father could do. Mila didn't return to her desk. She went to the rooftop terrace, a space reserved for executives but rarely used. The wind was sharp, cutting through her blazer, but she welcomed it, needed it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. The gala is black tie. A stylist will contact you for wardrobe, non-negotiable. She stared at the screen. Typed back, I can dress myself. His response came quickly. Not for this, you can't. This is theater. You're part of the performance now. Mila wanted to throw her phone off the roof. Instead, she typed, why me? You could bring anyone. The reply took longer this time. Because you understand stakes. And because you won't embarrass me. It wasn't a compliment, it was assessment. Cold, strategic, empty of anything human. Mila shoved her phone into her pocket. That night, she sat in her apartment with wine she didn't drink and a decision she couldn't avoid. She could refuse, walk away, find another job. But Thomas was right. Her mother's facility wouldn't wait. Her loans wouldn't pause. And in this economy, finding equivalent work would take months she didn't have. She was trapped. Not by force, by circumstance. By the slow grinding machinery of debt and obligation. Her phone buzzed again. Email from the stylist. Appointment scheduled, Saturday 10 a.m., address attached. Mr. Crane has provided parameters. Mila opened the attachment. A list of requirements. Elegant but conservative. No excessive jewelry. Hair down, natural. Minimal makeup. Project approachability and competence, not seduction. The last line made her jaw tighten. He'd thought of everything. Controlled everything. Even how she'd look. The stylist's studio was in a part of the city Mila couldn't afford to visit recreationally. The woman, sleek, French, terrifyingly competent, took one look at Mila and nodded. Monsieur Crane has excellent taste. You'll be perfect. She pulled dresses, measured, pinned, adjusted. When Mila finally saw herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress was black silk, simple, elegant, the kind of thing that whispered wealth without shouting it. She looked expensive. He'll be pleased, the stylist said. Mila's reflection didn't smile. Milan arrived like a storm. The flight was private. Thomas spent the entire journey working laptop open, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and controlled as he negotiated in 3 languages. Mila pretended to sleep. The car that met them at the airport was black, sleek, windows tinted. Thomas held the door open. "After you." Mila climbed in. The interior smelled like leather and jasmine. Thomas slid in beside her, not close, but close enough that she felt the heat of him. The car moved through Milan terracotta and stone, old buildings pressed against modern glass. "We're staying at the same hotel," Thomas said. "Separate floors. Your schedule will be sent to your room. The gala is tomorrow night." Mila nodded. "Until then," he continued, "stay visible in public spaces. The hotel bar, the restaurant, I need people to see you as part of the team." "More theatre," Mila said quietly. Thomas glanced at her. "Everything is theatre, Miss Hart. The sooner you accept that, the easier this becomes." The hotel was palatial. Mila's suite overlooked the Duomo. The bed looked like it belonged in a museum. On the desk, the garment bag waited, and beside it a handwritten note. "Wear this tomorrow, no deviations." Mila crumpled the note, then smoothed it out again, because refusing would cost her everything. And she'd already decided that survival mattered more than pride. That evening, Thomas texted, "Dinner downstairs, 8 p.m. Mila checked the time, 7:43. She changed into something appropriate, met him in the hotel restaurant. He stood when she arrived, pulled out her chair. They ate slowly. Pasta, seafood, wine that tasted like it cost more than her rent. And for the first time since she'd signed the contract, they talked. Not about work, not about strategy. About books, cities, the absurdity of private jets. Thomas almost smiled once. It made him look younger, less dangerous. Almost human. When the check came, he didn't let her see it. They walked to the elevators. At her floor, the doors opened. Mila stepped out, turned back. Thomas was watching her, expression unreadable. "Tomorrow will be difficult," he said. "I know. Stay close to me. Don't answer questions unless necessary. And if anyone makes you uncomfortable, tell me immediately." It sounded like a promise. Mila nodded. The doors began to close. "Thomas." They stopped. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner." Something shifted in his eyes. "You're welcome, Mila." The doors closed. And Mila stood in the hallway, heart beating unevenly, wondering when exactly he'd started using her first name, and why it felt like crossing a line neither of them had agreed to. The palazzo was older than the United States. Stone walls, frescoed ceilings, chandeliers that dripped light like liquid gold. Mila stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, hands trembling slightly, as she fastened her earrings, diamonds borrowed cold against her skin. The dress fit perfectly. Too perfectly. Her phone buzzed. "Car is downstairs. She took one last breath, then walked out. Thomas was waiting in the lobby. He wore a tuxedo black, impeccably tailored. His hair was pushed back, jaw clean-shaven. When he saw her, he went still. Just for a second. Then his expression smoothed. "You look appropriate," he said. Mila almost laughed. "High praise." "It is," he offered his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Neither am I." The palazzo was filled with people who looked like they'd been born wearing evening wear. Waiters moved through the crowd with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that were more art than food. Thomas's hand never left the small of Mila's back. He introduced her to investors, politicians, men with titles she didn't understand. "This is Mila Hart, acting head of European brand strategy." Every introduction was the same, polite, professional, calculated, and every time Mila felt eyes assessing her, measuring her worth, she smiled, shook hands, spoke when spoken to, and hated every second. An hour in, Domenico appeared. "Walk with me," he said to Mila. Thomas's jaw tightened. "Father!" "Alone." The tension was palpable. Finally, Thomas nodded. Domenico extended his arm. Mila took it. They walked through a side corridor, away from the noise. "You're nervous," Domenico said. "Should I be?" He smiled. "Probably." They stopped in front of a window overlooking gardens, hedges, fountains, paths disappearing into darkness. "My son is brilliant," Domenico said, "but he has a weakness." Mila's pulse quickened. "What weakness?" "He believes he can escape this life." Domenico turned to face her. "He thinks if he builds the company into something clean, he can erase where he came from." He paused. "He's wrong." Mila's throat felt tight. "Why are you telling me this?" Because you're part of his plan. And I need you to understand that no matter how hard he tries, the world will always see him as what he is. Which is? Domenico's smile didn't reach his eyes. A monster in a very expensive suit. The words landed like ice. You're his father, Mila said quietly. Which is why I know. Domenico stepped closer. And you're starting to care about him, I can see it. Mila's breath caught. I don't. Don't lie. His voice hardened. You'll have to choose eventually, your conscience or your survival. He straightened his cuffs. Enjoy the gala, Miss Hart. Then he walked away. Mila returned to the ballroom shaking. Thomas found her immediately. What did he say? Nothing important. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Mila! I said it was nothing. She could see him deciding whether to push. He didn't. Instead, he took her hand. Dance with me. What? Dance, people are watching. He led her to the center of the room. His hand found her waist. Hers rested on his shoulder. They moved. Slowly, precisely. What did my father say? Thomas asked again, voice low. Mila met his eyes. He said you're trying to escape something you can't escape. Thomas's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. He's right. The honesty startled her. Then why try? Because the alternative is becoming him. Thomas's grip on her waist tightened just slightly, and I'd rather fail trying than succeed at that. The music swelled. They turned, and Mila realized, with a clarity that terrified her, that she was starting to care. Not strategically, not professionally. Actually care. They left the gala at midnight. The car ride back to the hotel was silent, not the comfortable silence of shared understanding, but something heavier, weighted with things unsaid. Thomas stared out the window. His jaw was tight, shoulders tense beneath the perfect cut of his tuxedo. Mila didn't ask what he was thinking. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. When they arrived, Thomas walked her to the elevator, pressed the button for her floor without a word. The doors opened. Mila stepped inside, turned. Thomas was still standing in the lobby, hands in his pockets, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Good night, she said. He nodded once. The doors began to close, then stopped. Thomas's hand shot out, holding them open. Come to my suite, he said. Mila's breath caught. What? We need to talk. His voice was calm, too calm. About what my father said, about tomorrow's meetings, about... He stopped. Please. The word was so unexpected, so unlike him, that Mila found herself nodding before she could think better of it. Thomas's suite was on the top floor. Penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Milan spread out beneath them like a glittering grid, thousands of lives reduced to pinpricks of light. Thomas shrugged off his jacket, loosened his tie, poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter without asking if she wanted one. He handed her a glass. Sit. Mila sat on the edge of the sofa. Thomas remained standing, looking out at the city. My father is right, he said after a long moment. About most things, that's what makes him dangerous. He took a drink. When I was 23, I wanted to leave. Go to America, start over, build something that had nothing to do with the family name. He turned to face her. My father said no, not with words, with actions. He made sure every door I tried to open closed before I could reach it. Mila's chest tightened. So I stayed, Thomas continued, and I learned how to negotiate, how to control, how to turn refusal into compliance without ever raising my voice. He set his glass down. I became exactly what he wanted, efficient, ruthless, necessary. He paused. And then I went to Venice. Mila's heart stumbled. I went to Carnival because I needed to disappear, Thomas said quietly. Just for one night, be no one, want nothing, answer to nothing. He looked at her. And then you kissed me. The room felt too small, too warm. I didn't know, Mila started. You did. Thomas stepped closer, not threatening, just present. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a CEO, not a crane, just someone worth kissing because you wanted to. His voice dropped. It was the first honest thing anyone had done to me in years. Mila's hands tightened around her glass. That's why you hired me, she said. Not because I'm good at my job. So you are good at your job. Thomas sat on the arm of the sofa, Close enough now that she could smell his cologne, faint, clean, expensive. But yes, that's part of it. That's insane. Probably. He almost smiled. But everything about this is insane, you know that by now. Mila stood, needed distance, needed air. I can't be whatever you need me to be, she said. I'm not your escape, I'm not your redemption, I'm just human, he finished. I know. He stood too, crossed the space between them in 2 strides. They were close now, too close. I'm not asking you to save me, Thomas said, voice low. I'm asking you to see me just for a moment, not as your boss, not as a crane, just as someone who's tired of performing. Mila's breath was uneven. And then what? She whispered. Thomas's eyes searched hers. I don't know. The honesty of it cracked something open in her chest. She should leave, walk out, go back to her room and pretend this conversation never happened. Instead, she stayed. Your father said you'd destroy me. He's probably right. Then why are we doing this? Thomas's hand lifted slowly, carefully, and touched her cheek, just his fingertips barely there. Because I'm tired of being right, he said. And then he kissed her. It wasn't like Venice. Venice had been impulsive, reckless, 2 strangers colliding in the dark. This was deliberate. Thomas kissed her like he was making a choice he couldn't take back. Slow, controlled. His hand cupped her jaw, thumb brushing along her cheekbone as his mouth moved against hers with a precision that made her knees weak. Mila's hands found his shirt, fisted in the fabric. Not pulling him closer, just holding on. When they broke apart, both breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. This is a mistake, he murmured. I know. We should stop. I know. Neither of them moved. The city glittered beyond the windows, silent witness to something neither of them could name. Finally, Thomas stepped back, put distance between them. You should go, he said quietly. Mila nodded, didn't trust her voice. She walked to the door, hand on the handle. Mila. She stopped, didn't turn. Tomorrow, Thomas said. We go back to how things were, professional, distant, nothing changes. Okay. But tonight, his voice cracked just slightly. Tonight I need you to know that if things were different, if I were different. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Mila opened the door. Good night, Thomas. She left before he could respond. Back in her room, Mila sat on the edge of the bed and touched her lips. They still felt warm, still tasted like whiskey and impossibility. Her phone was on the nightstand. She picked it up. 3:47 a.m. 1 new email. Unknown sender. Subject, you should see this. Her stomach dropped. She opened it. Inside was a photograph. Her and Thomas, in the penthouse, through the window. The kiss captured in perfect clarity. His hand on her face, her body pressed against his, the city glittering behind them like 1,000 watching eyes. Below the image, a single line of text. Domenico sends his regards. Mila's blood ran cold. They'd been watched. Photographed. Documented. And now Thomas's father had proof. Her hands shook as she forwarded the email to Thomas. No message, just the image. His response came within seconds. Stay in your room, lock the door, I'm handling this. Then another message. I'm sorry. Mila set the phone down, stared at the ceiling, and realized with cold certainty that the kiss hadn't been a moment of connection. It had been a trap. And they'd both walked into it willingly. Mila didn't sleep. She sat in the chair by the window, watching the sky shift from black to grey to the pale blue of early morning, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. Thomas didn't text again. At 6:23 a.m., there was a knock on her door. Mila looked through the peephole. Thomas. She opened the door. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His shirt was wrinkled, tie gone, hair disheveled in a way that made him look younger, more vulnerable. We need to leave, he said, now. What happened? My father is moving faster than I anticipated. Thomas stepped inside, closed the door behind him. The photograph was sent to 3 media outlets overnight. I've contained 2 of them. The third is negotiating. Mila's stomach twisted. Negotiating what? Silence for a price. Thomas's jaw tightened. The price is you. Her breath caught. What does that mean? It means they want a statement from you, confirming that you're romantically involved with me, that this isn't workplace exploitation, That everything is consensual and transparent. He paused. It's leverage. Once you make that statement, you're tied to me publicly. Permanently. If I go down, you go down with me. Mila's vision blurred at the edges. And if I refuse, then the photo runs, with speculation, innuendo, your name attached to mine in the worst possible way. Thomas's voice was tight. Your career ends, your credibility evaporates, and my father wins. That's not a choice. No, Thomas's eyes held hers. It's not. They flew back that afternoon. The jet was silent. Thomas worked. Mila stared out the window at clouds that looked like they'd been painted by someone who'd never seen the sky up close. When they landed, a car was waiting. Thomas held the door open. We're going to the office, he said. Why? Because we're making the statement, together, before anyone else controls the narrative. The press release was drafted by Thomas's legal team. Clinical, precise, stripped of anything that could be used against them. Crane International CEO Thomas Crane and acting head of European brand strategy Mila Hart have disclosed a personal relationship that began prior to Ms. Hart's recent promotion. All corporate ethics protocols have been followed. Ms. Hart's professional qualifications and performance remain the sole basis for her advancement. It was a lie, but it was a useful lie. Mila signed it. Thomas signed it. It went live at 4 p.m. By 4:03, Mila's phone was flooded with messages. Colleagues, friends, her mother's care facility asking if everything was all right. She turned her phone off. That evening, Thomas called her to his office. When she arrived, he was standing by the window, not working, just staring. Sit, he said without turning. Mila sat. Thomas finally turned to face her. I'm ending the European project. The words hit like a physical blow. What? Effective immediately. The campaign stops, the team disbands, you'll be reassigned. Mila's hands clenched. We're 3 weeks from launch, we've already... I know what we've secured. Thomas's voice was flat. And I'm ending it anyway. Why? He didn't answer, just looked at her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Is this because of the photograph? Mila demanded. Partially. That's not fair. No, Thomas agreed, it's not. He crossed to his desk, pulled out a file, set it in front of her. Open it. Mila hesitated, then flipped it open. Inside were more photographs, surveillance images, her leaving the hotel in Milan, her and Thomas in the car, walking into the gala, dancing. And beneath those darker images, Thomas meeting with men in expensive suits, handshakes in dimly lit restaurants, exchanges that looked less like business and more like negotiations with people who didn't appear on organizational charts. Her stomach dropped. My father had you followed, Thomas said quietly. From the moment you accepted the promotion, he wanted proof that you could be controlled, that you were compromised. Mila's throat tightened. And? They found it. Thomas closed the file. Not the way he expected, but enough. He walked back to the window. He's threatening to release these, to spin a narrative that you knowingly participated in laundering Crane family money through the European rebrand, that you're complicit. Mila's blood ran cold. That's insane. I didn't... I know. Thomas's voice was tight. But it doesn't matter. The accusation alone would destroy you, your career, your credibility, everything. He turned. So I'm ending it, the project, your involvement, all of it. Mila's vision blurred. You're firing me. I'm protecting you. By destroying everything I've worked for. Her voice rose. By making me look like a failure. Better a failure than a criminal. That's not your choice to make. Yes, Thomas said, voice hard now. It is because you work for me, because I brought you into this, because... He stopped, jaw clenched. Because what? Mila pressed. Thomas closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were raw, unguarded. Because I care what happens to you, and I won't let my father use you as leverage against me. The confession hung in the air. Mila's breath came faster. So you're just giving up, letting him win? I'm choosing you over the company. Thomas's voice dropped. Over my father, over everything I've spent 10 years building. He stepped closer. That's not giving up, Mila. That's the first real choice I've made in my entire life. Mila didn't know she was crying until she tasted salt on her lips. She wiped her eyes roughly. I don't want to be your martyr, she said. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You're not. Thomas reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. My father is, this family is, I've been losing for years. I just finally realized it. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. You asked me once why I chose you. The real answer is because you made me want something more than control. Mila's heart cracked open. What do you want? Thomas looked at her for a long moment. I want to be someone you don't have to be afraid of. The words were so quiet, so raw. Mila's free hand lifted, touched his cheek. I'm not afraid of you, she whispered. I'm afraid of losing myself in this, in you. Then don't. Thomas leaned into her touch. Walk away, take the severance I'm offering, find another job, another life. Is that what you want? No, his voice broke. But it's what you deserve. Mila's chest ached. She should leave. She should take the out he was offering and run. Instead, she stepped closer. What if I don't want to walk away? Thomas's breath hitched. Mila, what if I want to stay, she continued. Not for the job, not for the company, for you. You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. Her hand slid to the back of his neck. I'm asking you to stop trying to protect me and let me make my own choice. Thomas's hands found her waist, gripped tight. If you stay, everything changes. My father won't stop, the threats won't end. And your name is already attached to mine, publicly, permanently. He paused. Even if I shut down the project, even if I fire you to protect you, your name is already in the press releases, in the media coverage. You're already implicated. Mila's stomach tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying that the choice isn't whether you stay or go. The choice is whether you fight this alone or with me. His eyes held hers. And I need you to understand, fighting with me means accepting that you'll lose things you can't get back. Your anonymity, your safety, your ability to walk away cleanly. Mila's hands trembled. That's not a choice, that's a trap. Yes, Thomas said quietly. It is, and I'm sorry. He stepped closer. But if you stay, I promise you this. I won't make decisions for you anymore. I won't use you. And I won't pretend this doesn't cost you everything. Mila looked at him, really looked. At the man who'd built an empire and hated every brick of it. Who'd kissed her in Venice like he was drowning. Who'd just admitted he'd destroyed her career trying to save it. I lose either way, she said. Yes? Then I'd rather lose fighting. Thomas's expression cracked. You're sure? No, Mila whispered, but I'm choosing it anyway. Thomas kissed her then. Not like Milan, not tentative or apologetic. This was a promise, a surrender, a choice made in full awareness of its cost. His mouth moved against hers with a desperation that made her knees weak. His hand slid up her back, pulling her closer, as if proximity alone could erase the distance they'd been maintaining for weeks. Mila's fingers tangled in his hair. She kissed him back with everything she'd been holding in anger, fear, want, defiance. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. This is the point of no return, he murmured. I know. Once we cross this line, I can't protect you from what comes next. I'm not asking you to. Mila's eyes met his. I'm asking you to let me stand beside you instead of behind you. Thomas's expression shifted, something like relief flooding through. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said, or the most reckless. Probably both. He almost smiled. Definitely both. They spent the next hour planning. Not romantic planning, strategic planning. Thomas laid it out with the same precision he used for corporate negotiations. My father controls the family board, but I control the company's operational assets. If I move those into a separate legal entity before he can freeze them, we have leverage. And if he fights back? Mila asked. He will. Thomas's jaw tightened. But fighting back requires exposing the family's unofficial operations, which means risking investigation. He won't do that unless he's desperate. And you're betting he's not desperate enough. I'm betting he values self-preservation over controlling me. Thomas looked at her. It's not a guarantee, but it's a chance. Mila nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Stay visible. Stay credible. If he tries to discredit you, we push back with documentation, contracts, performance reviews, evidence that your promotion was merit-based. He paused. And we don't hide. We don't apologize. We act like we have nothing to be ashamed of. Even though we do? Thomas's mouth curved slightly. Especially because we do. Shame is weakness, and we can't afford weakness right now. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed. The European project didn't end. It transformed. Thomas restructured it under a new subsidiary, one outside his father's direct control. Mila remained as lead strategist, but now she reported to a board of independent directors Thomas had carefully selected. It was brilliant. It was also dangerous, because Domenico didn't take the move quietly. He called Thomas twice. Both times, Thomas didn't answer. He sent lawyers. Thomas sent his own. He threatened to release the surveillance photographs. Thomas released a statement first, acknowledging the relationship, emphasizing Mila's qualifications and making it clear that any attempt to smear her would be met with legal action. It was a chess match played in boardrooms and legal briefs. And slowly, painfully, Thomas started winning. 3 weeks after Milan, Mila stood in Thomas's office at sunset. The city stretched out beneath them, bathed in gold light. "It's working," she said quietly. Thomas stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "For now." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm not." He glanced at her. "My father doesn't lose gracefully. This isn't over." "But we're winning." "We're surviving," Thomas corrected. "There's a difference." Mila turned to face him. "Do you regret it, choosing this?" Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. "No," he said. "I regret that it cost you so much, but I don't regret choosing you." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You asked me once what I wanted. The answer is this, standing here with someone who sees me as more than a name or a threat." He paused. "That's worth more than an empire." Mila's chest tightened. "You're going to make me cry." "Please don't. I'm terrible at handling emotions." She laughed, actually laughed. And Thomas smiled, a real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and made him look like the man he might have been if he'd been born into a different family. "What happens now?" Mila asked. "Now," Thomas pulled her closer. "Now we keep fighting, together, until we either win or burn everything down trying. Those are terrible odds." "I know," he kissed her forehead, "but I've spent my entire life playing it safe, and it only made me miserable." He looked at her. "This is the first risk I've taken that actually feels worth it." 6 months later, Crane International completed its European rebrand. The campaign was a success. Media coverage was positive. Investors returned. And slowly, carefully, the Crane name began to mean something other than whispered rumors and closed investigations. Thomas didn't reconcile with his father, but he stopped trying to escape him. Instead, he built something new, something clean, something that didn't require apology or justification. Mila stayed, not because she had to, but because she chose to. Every day, every decision, every risk. She chose him, and he chose her back. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was no dramatic confrontation where Domenico admitted defeat, no perfect ending where all threats disappeared. But there was something better. There was partnership, honesty. Two people who'd walked into a trap together and decided to stay not because it was easy, but because it was real. And in a world built on performance and control, real was the rarest thing of all.
I learned real early how to smile while keeping every feeling blocked. I don't make space for accidents. I don't believe in fate. But then you kissed a stranger once, and everything got late. You didn't know my name that night. I didn't know your face. But something in the dark went wrong, or maybe fell in place. I don't fall, I calculate. I don't lose control, I negotiate. But you didn't ask for power, you didn't play my game. You just looked at me like I was real and nothing stayed the same. I don't fall, I calculate. I don't lose control, I negotiate. But you didn't ask for power, you didn't play my game. You just looked at me like I was real and nothing stayed the same. I don't fall, I wear my silence like a suit, tailored sharp, expensive calm. I say the things that keep me safe, I do the least least amount of harm. They taught me love is leverage, a weakness you don't show. But I forgot how dangerous it is to let someone know. You saw the cracks I tried to hide. You didn't try to run. You stood right there when things got loud, when I should have been the one. I don't fall, I don't choose, I don't risk what I can't lose. But you walked into my chaos without asking me to lie. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. If loving you ruins me, then maybe that's a cause. I've owned everything I touch, except the things I lost. They'll say you were a mistake, they'll say I crossed the line, but I was already empty before you changed my mind. I don't need saving, I don't need grace. I just need one moment where I don't fake my face. I won't promise safety, I won't promise clean, but I promise you this truth, I won't disappear again. If standing next to you means I burn what I defend, then I'll step into the fire. Stop pretending I can win. I spent my life in control, but loving you was the first thing that ever felt honest.